But first, it takes a lot to get most Australians worked up enough to get out and protest. Normally, we keep to ourselves, don't we, and register our unhappiness at the ballot box every couple of years. The fact that tens of thousands of Australians took to the streets, though, on yesterday, wanting to reclaim Australia, shows that we are not happy. Yesterday's protests and marches have not been called for by anyone in obvious authority. And apart from Pauline Hanson addressing the Canberra rally, they were not supported by anyone especially well known. About the only advanced mainstream media they had was in a discussion last week on Bedfordham's Sydney radio program. The fact that they happened at all in such substantial numbers says something, given that the Albanese government had already dismissed them in advance as right-wing nutjobs and racists. Now, sure, some of those elements turned up, but it was nowhere near the majority.
We're not a racist country, we just want a good calibre of people in here.
Love migration, okay? I'm from a family of immigrants as well. The point is, how many you bring in the country? Where do you house them?
And what we want to see is a slowdown of the immigration because we're not looking after our own anymore.
The reason for this march was not about racism, not about pro-white. It was about one flag for one nation.
It's not just roads, it's not just the housing, because obviously houses are overinflated. The infrastructure of Australia on all levels is stressed by migration.
Indeed, as you've just seen there, the vast bulk of the attendees were ordinary, everyday Australians from all walks of life and ethnic backgrounds, as Phil Coorey conceded this afternoon in the online version of the Australian Financial Review. The fact that so many turned out shows that large numbers of Australians are fed up with social developments that they don't like, and they're fed up with governments that don't listen. And there is a lot not to like about the way Australia's changing. Take immigration, which was the main focus of yesterday's events. Now, of course, immigration is out of control. For most of the post-war period, it averaged 90,000 people per year. Then for the decade pre-pandemic, beginning around the Rudd era, it was then upwards of 200,000 a year. And for the past 3 years, immigration's been running at nearly 500,000 per annum. The impact here is obvious in our sky-high house prices and rents, on our clogged roads and packed public transport, and in the low wages for jobs that recent migrants mostly do. The cleaning, the caring, the delivering, washing dishes in restaurants and picking fruit. All absolutely necessary jobs, but ones that many Australians shun from a sense of entitlement born of too many people going to university for dead-end degrees, or a something-for-nothing welfare mindset. But it's not just the immigration quantity that's a problem, but the quality too. The values quality of those we give the chance of a lifetime, which is, of course, to live in Australia. It's impossible not to notice a heavy presence of migrants, mostly from the Middle East, in the succession of pro-Palestine rallies that are really pro-Hamas rallies, and that are often with a very nasty anti-Israel, even anti-Jewish edge. Plus the numerous hate preachers, many of them recent migrants, attacking the country that's supposed to be their home. Then there's the double standards of officialdom. Same police that stood quietly by while Jew-hating protests have gone on for months and months and months. Well, they actively clashed with protesters yesterday. And they even held rolling press conferences across the day, which all helped build Labor's narrative that protesting against high immigration was somehow illegitimate. Well, it's not illegitimate. The problem isn't the protesters, the problem is the political class who refuse to allow a rational, sober discussion on this issue. The problem is our leaders who want to bury their collective heads in the sand and pretend if they don't talk about high immigration, then somehow people's concerns will just go away. Well, they won't. The Albanese government has been promising for 2 years to rein in migration, but nothing's changed. The coalition, after promising to cut migration, failed even to release an immigration policy at the last election because upsetting the vested interests, the colleges selling residency in the guise of education and the businesses taking advantage of cheap foreign workers, well, that was all too hard. But as I said in my column for News Limited papers yesterday, nature abhors a vacuum. If mainstream leaders ignore an issue that's understandably concerning millions of people, well, fringe leaders will eventually emerge. And so too will the extremists. And yes, yesterday, as I said, there were plenty of those on the streets. And I, like you, condemn that. But we can't fall into the trap of letting the left use a few extremists to close down debate about the scale of Australia's record immigration intake. On the streets yesterday, right around the country, were a lot of decent people who don't like being made to feel like a stranger in their own country. And many, many more who want change and are looking for someone to lead it. Remember, nature abhors a vacuum. And as reported today, for the first time, populist or far-right parties are leading the polls in the UK, France and Germany as, quote, the latest sign of growing voter discontent in much of the continent following years of high immigration and inflation. Now, this stuff, if not talked about, if not debated, doesn't go away, it festers. Remember when the political establishment damned those pro-women rallies because that protest in Melbourne was gate-crashed by neo-Nazis and tarred a lot of reasonable people with the legitimate complaint that they were somehow fanatical? Well, it turned out that democracy there was the loser. So too John Pizzuto, he lost the Liberal leadership and quite a few $1 million because he wrongly assumed that a handful of idiots negated the legitimate views of women angry at the erosion of their rights. Well, yesterday was a much bigger national replay because talking about the sort of country we are and want to be, far from being an illegitimate topic, should be about the most important thing on our national agenda. Now, Australia is not yet like the big countries of Europe where anti-immigration populists are making the political running. But we are headed that way if the cone of silence in Canberra continues, not just from Labor here, the Liberals too share the blame. We should not be afraid to stand up for our Anglo-Celtic core culture or our Judeo-Christian ethos. And we should be unafraid to put as much stress on our national unity as on our diversity. And if Susan Lee hasn't worked this out yet, let me warn her, if the coalition wants to avoid a reform-style breakout here at home, there's work to be done by her team, and fast.